Just about a week ago, I was at the camera store looking for used and for parts cameras like I normally do, just trying to see if there's something that seems reasonably easy for me to fix. Maybe not a complicated cloth shutter that's jammed up and ripped off of its moorings or whatever, but something that looks like it just needs new batteries, maybe some corrosion scraped out. Maybe it's a Pentax PC35AF. The Pentax PC35AF is an autofocus point and shoot, not too uncommon in the 1980s. This one was manufactured from 82 to 84, to give you any idea of what sort of things were coming out at the time. Olympus Twin, things like that. Very basic clamshell style, ooh, wow, it snaps open. It's got the 2 autofocus windows and auto exposure control. A lot of f2.8 ones as well. Pretty common, pretty basic. But I will say that this camera has one thing that gave me a little bit of a giggle, and I'll show you that in a moment, but why don't I show you the basics of shooting, loading, all that sort of shit with the Pentax PC35AF. First thing we're going to want to do is load some film in here. So what we want to do is grab this little knob here from the underside, give it a pull, and unlatch the back. Pretty typical, pretty usual stuff. The same as any other Nikon or what have you with a reverse knob that doubles as a latch. You go ahead and put your card in right here. And you bring this across over onto these. Advancing is done via this thumb screw right here, which would draw the film across. And of course you'd sit here and rewind as well. After getting that taut across the back, you just give it a close. Go ahead and wind until the film counter window reads 1. Your advance will stop there automatically. You're now ready to shoot. To do so, simply hit the door latch button. This turns the camera on and it's now ready to shoot. Enabling flash is as simple as pulling on this little red tab here. With flash enabled, the camera is now ready to take pictures in lower light scenarios. When done with the camera, simply push down on the flash and push the door across to close and turn off the camera. It is now ready to be carried, pocketed, whatever you want. Nothing will be able to fire the shutter, and nothing will be able to fire the flash when it's in this state. When we've reached the end of the roll, we want to go ahead and rewind, and we start by pushing in on the film brake, pulling up on this tab here, and spinning this around. After loading your film, it's important to set the ISO on the bottom of the camera. This camera does not have DX code reading or any sort of automatic sensing of speed. So you got to go ahead and set it somewhere between 25 and 400. This is a little bit limiting, but for the most part, I've not had any serious issues. I've been shooting T-Max 100, an expired 2001 roll that I have in bulk, at about 200. If you're shooting a backlit subject, it's important to make sure you press this button here, the 1.5 stop compensation for backlights. You'll hold that down while you take your picture, and that will enable the camera to stop you up and hopefully eliminate any sort of backlighting issues that would normally arise if you were to just take the picture. When shooting an under-illuminated scene, the viewfinder will display an amber LED and the camera will screech at you until you activate flash. Activating flash makes the hellish screaming stop and it's replaced with a green LED. When the flash is ready to fire, an amber lamp is illuminated here to the left of the viewfinder. Fantastic. As is per usual with most cameras of this type, there's an included self-timer function. Pushing up on this little lever around the button collar will enable the self-timer. It's set to 10 seconds by default and cannot be changed. With the self-timer active, pushing down on the shutter button begins a countdown. "10 seconds after you push the shutter fires. There's one thing left to take a look at, and that is the viewfinder. The viewfinder holds that little secret that I was teasing earlier. You see, this camera does have one remarkable feature, and that is a small zone focusing scale inside of the viewfinder itself. Why don't we take a deeper look at the viewfinder and how it works during normal operation. The Viewfinder is fairly typical for your run-of-the-mill point-and-shoot. It has a set of frame lines for composing your shot, with reasonable accuracy at distance. When you're a bit too close to the subject, use these lines instead. It'll compensate for parallax between the lens and the viewfinder pretty decently. Something that is quite unique to the PC35 that I hinted at earlier is its little heads-up display inside of the viewfinder. When half-pressing the shutter button, this needle will move along the scale to indicate what distance the camera thinks is appropriate. Pretty useful for sanity checks on the autofocus system when you're out in the wild. Like any zone focusing system, it's made up of 3 different zones represented by 3 different icons. Here, you see the close, which is around 2.5 foot to 0.8 meters. Here you see the mid-range zone. That's about 5 foot or 1.5 meters. And of course there is infinity focus at, well, infinity. Your standard mountain, 2 people, 1 person kind of zone focusing system. Nothing revolutionary, but so far in all of my time messing around with point-and-shoots, I've never seen one have a scale like this inside of the viewfinder. So, I think at the end of the day, assuming you can find this for a decent price, the PC35AF is a pretty good contender for a pretty basic beginner film camera. It's also just nice to have walking around. You don't always want to be focusing and worrying about exposure and stuff. Sometimes I just want to smack the flash open and start shooting shit at night, or in the house, or I don't know, whatever I'm doing, at parties, things like that. I'll be that obnoxious asshole. Definitely has a nice sharp lens to it. I've found that the exposure control is pretty bang on, honestly. Focus has been more or less fine. You can tell when it's off, especially in low lighting conditions, when it's stopping itself up to 2.8 or so. You can kind of tell, especially with the lower shutter speeds. Things get a bit shaky and a bit soft. But for the most part, I've had nothing but crisp photos, even with the one-stop push I put all the T-Max 100 when I ran through this through. And for just needing its contacts cleaned, and maybe the lens wiped off and some dust removed, this is not in bad shape. I'll probably need to reseal all the light seals on this at some point. The foam's kind of failing on the back of this, but overall, nice little camera. Light too. If you can find one for under 20 bucks, maybe even 30 bucks, I say go for it. Anyways, if you like this, I don't know, I'll probably make another video about stuff. I mean, there's all this shit behind me. I could make a video of each one of these things. Stay tuned for that, I guess. Anyways, I've been Dylan, you've been watching, and this is the end of the video. Bye.